Hello and welcome to WaAfrika Online. Today's edition features a major throwback of Ghanaian rapper M.anifest's keynote speech at the Ephraim Amu Memorial Lecture, which I believe ought to be documented because archives are of the essence. In 2019, the renowned rapper delivered an insightful keynote speech filled with nuanced moments, which he articulated effortlessly with a sprinkle of humor at the Ephraim Amu Memorial Lecture, themed Reimagining Us, the Role of Popular Music in Actualization. During his keynote speech, the rapper articulated a number of significant topics such as the importance of popular music for self-actualization, modern-day popular music dominance, paying homage to his iconic Ghanaian predecessors, the evolution of popular music resonance, and its potential for actualization, among others. M.anifest, also known as God MC, M. Diggity, is a Ghanaian rapper and lyricist. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from Macalester College in the US. He is most known for his authentic substance-filled music as well as his Afrocentric style. The critically acclaimed rapper, who has been a practitioner in the music scene for over a decade, was also the youngest and non-academic person to deliver the Ephraim Amu Memorial Lecture. According to the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Ephraim Amu Memorial Lecture is a commemoration of the achievements of a humble and dedicated man, Dr. Ephraim Amu, who devoted his entire life to cultural nationalism. An educationist, reformist, and creative musician, he left a mark on Ghana's cultural memory, perhaps more than any of his contemporaries. Here is how M.anifest unpacked the role of popular music in self-actualization in his notable gem-loaded keynote speech that ought to be circulating across all mediums of communication.
Welcome to the Ephraim Amu Memorial Lecture, the remix edition. So I thought it was only fitting that we began with an improvised remix version of one of his tunes. Young people, this is our takeover. It is a quiet coup d'etat we are going to effect here, but it's all for the greater good. It's an incredible honor to have been asked to deliver this keynote, Reimagining Us, the Role of Popular Music in Self-Actualization. For almost a century, Ghana's musical landscape has been built on a robust foundation laid by Dr. Ephraim Amu. I could not fathom the depth of this foundation until I did the intensive research necessary to deliver this keynote. I mean, intensive, not making rap songs intensive, way more. I'd like to thank Professor Techiwa Menu, Professor Kofi Anyido, and the Academy for giving the opportunity for a younger voice outside of the halls of academia to share a critical perspective of an artistic creator, a perspective different from that of cultural critics and scholars. For over a decade, I've been a practitioner in the popular music space, or rap, and culture many in the academy might not readily understand. My knowledge of the popular music space has been in part through bending and inventing rules through this art form, and through the privilege of countless free lessons from my grandfather, Professor J.H. Kitia, naturally. The Academy's invitation came in time for me to engage him on a few occasions before he passed. My only regret was not heeding his caution when he said this to me. When is the date for the lecture? Hurry up and do it before I leave. I delivered this keynote in honor of Dr. Ephraim Amu, enveloped in the knowledge and spirit of my grandfather, Professor J.H. Kitia. To stand before you, not just as M.anifest, as the youngest and the first, youngest? Confirmed? We like accolades in my generation, so. To stand before you as the youngest and the first outside of academia, to be tasked with giving the Ephraim Amu Memorial Lecture is an honor I do not take lightly. I'm many years removed from my days studying economics as a college student, and with no doctorate or PhD to my name, no published academic writings, not even sitting in a class of dondology, I am presumably wholly unqualified to be engaged in this sort of academic exercise. Yet, I strongly believe there's value in fortifying the relationship between academia and the outside world. And I do believe it was reiterated just before I came. I'm further with the Kofi Anyido, who led me onto a rarely spoken truth. The truth that most of Dr. Amu's seminal compositions, such as Yenara Assassini and Bonre Kente, were created in his 20s and 30s. There's clearly power in the youthful mind. So I'll begin with the first verse, an interrogation of popular music, self-actualization, and the Amu approach. How do we reimagine who we are? In this keynote, I address the importance of popular music and how we see and express ourselves. Additionally, I speak to self-actualization as an important factor in this conversation. How does African popular music, and by extension, popular music culture, play a role in our ability to achieve our potential as individuals and in turn as a collective? I analyze how factors such as technology allow for new heights of immediacy and resonance for popular music. There is a bridge between the influence of popular music and the theory in psychology known as self-actualization. I know, I'm using before I can see for my younger ones here, but by the end it all makes sense. There's a bridge between the influence of popular music and the theory in psychology known as self-actualization. I support my analysis with anecdotes from the last few decades, as well as the connection between Ephraim Amu and popular music. How did his radical pre-independence approach to composition, triggered by an interrogation of popular music, spark a cultural revolution with profound implications on the African identity and psyche? And what can we learn from this as Ghanaians of today? My focus on popular music and not traditional music or art music is based on its overwhelming relevance to the youth, in particular to the millennials, the generation born between 1980 and 2000. If you're a millennial, say I. Wonderful. I'm not alone. Popular music is one of the most significant influences in shaping the thinking and behavior of young people. In Christina Williams' 2001 research piece titled, "Does It Really Matter? Young People and Popular Music," she says, quote, "It is important that people's own accounts of their lives are taken seriously." She continues on to say, "I feel like it's only respectful to ask people about their engagements with popular culture rather than simply making assumptions or developing theories without contacting the people being discussed." Hence why I'm here. I would argue that the world is not divided into fans and non-fans, but rather that people engage with music in different ways at different times, end quote. On the matter of self-actualization, I use the hierarchy of needs framework proposed by the psychologist Abraham Maslow, a 5-tier pyramid model of human needs. So from bottom to top, the 5-tier model of the hierarchy of human needs consists of, the first one is biological and physiological needs. The second one is safety needs, shelter, security, order, all of that good stuff. The third one is love and belonging needs. If you've been in love, you know that level. The fourth one is esteem needs, esteem for oneself and respect from others. And the fifth one, which is what is of concern to this keynote, is self-actualization. So self-actualization, for all intents and purposes of this keynote, is realizing your potential through creativity and a mental and spiritual awakening. The cultivation of popular music in an indigenized fashion by contemporary musicians on the continent and in the diaspora is shifting the gaze of aspiration of African millennials from a Western prism to an African one. I seek to further the conversation on the importance of popular music in the self-actualization agenda, to center popular music with intention and outline the social cultural power that comes with the music. So that's the, as I say, grand summary of what I'm going to talk about. So let me get to the meat of the matter without wasting time. Verse 2, the Yam Ponsa provocation, popular music influence on the Amu approach. I begin with the incessant critique directed at Amu during his time as a teacher and catechist in training at the Kupon Presbyterian College in the 1920s and early 1930s. Quote, "Teacher Amu, why are you now teaching vulgar songs like Yam Ponsa at the seminary?" Unquote. End quote, sorry. In the eyes of his Christian colleagues, adopting the wildly popular Yam Ponsa dance tune was sacrilegious. Even though Amu wrote entirely new and sanitized lyrics to the Yamponsa melody, members of the church and some of his colleagues at the training college remained opposed and could not be placated. According to one of his biographers, Fred Ajiman, they were concerned Amu was contaminating the minds and souls of the students with his pagan songs. Very heavy accusation. Yet Amu's interrogation of Yamponsa was one of the pivotal points in his approach towards compositions. In a 1993 conversation with Professor Kofi Agao, Dr. Amu tells a fascinating story about what I refer to as the Yamponsa provocation and its lasting influence on him. Quote, "Well, you see, before I started writing in our idiom, you know there's a popular dance tune in Ghana called Yamponsa. Now, there used to be a journal produced at Achimota during those days. And one Mr. Ward, a historian but also a musician, wrote something in that journal about Gold Coast songs and quoted this as an example. And the principal of the training college at the Coupon read about this." Dr. Amu goes on to describe the curiosity of Reverend Ferguson, the principal. He says, "What is this tune, Yamponsa? I want to hear the students sing it. So I asked the students to sing it. Of course, it is a dance tune. We had all heard it, and we all knew it, and they sang it." He concludes by elaborating on the personal influence of Yamponsa on him. Quote, "When I went home that day, I said, but I ought to produce this in actual writing. I must write down the notation. Later, when I learned drumming, I found that this technique of combining triple effect with duple effect was there too. And that made me come upon what I now describe as a basic African rhythm. So that's how I got rhythm." End quote. It was a radical act for Dr. Amu to accept and adopt Yamponsa. Furthermore, it was a fascinating feat reconciling Yamponsa's adoption with his staunch Christian beliefs and the Eurocentric academic conception of music which prevailed at the time. This was the 1920s, after all, when African music elements were inherently considered pagan and basic or inferior. Popular music then and now share a common bond. It is not the preserve of those formerly trained in music or composition, unlike art music or classical music. One difference, however, is that in those earlier decades of the 20th century, popular music was made to belong to the public domain as part of folklore. Professor John Collins details how Yamponsa was associated with different creators. The first instance is in 1918 by a group of Ghanaian cocoa brokers who were working in a town of Apija, who are Akan in southern Ghana. Obviously, I had to go to the map to try and figure out where Apija is, so if you know, yeah, that's great. And we have 16 regions now, so it's a little more difficult. The second instance was in 1924, as it was held in Kibi. And the third instance, Professor Collins recounts, is in 1928 in the form of a recording by Kwame Asari, also known as Jacob Sam. So Yamponsa was of the Gold Coast, readily understood, linguistically relatable, with a primal allure, as is often the case with popular music motifs. Dr. Amu continued on to research traditional music and drumming in depth and incorporate that and his understanding of the motif used in Yamponsa to create an African idiom to guide his compositions. Self-acceptance and authenticity are both important requirements for self-actualization. Popular music voices the stories of who we are and what we go through. Popular music, it validates us and allows us to be our authentic selves. I, for one, could never have found validation in being a rapper, were it not for my iconic predecessors such as Reggie Rockstone, Obrafo, and Comfort Kwade, who were able to make music with style and content centered on the Ghanaian experience. No amount of time I spent listening to Nas, Jay-Z, or those people could have brought me that validation to be my authentic self. because the stories they told, no matter how relatable in a human sense, were not Ghanaian stories. I could not always easily see myself in them. As opposed to, yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the most classic hip-hop album in Ghana called Paramuka. And as opposed to when I first heard this, yeah, let's remind ourselves. Is this familiar? And when I heard something like this, there was something about it that felt Ghanaian, and Obrafo rapped incredibly with proverbs and etc. And 20 years later, I'm going to do my live remix right now. Can I do that? Yeah, I painted the skies red until the raindrops bled. Now heaven whispers words I never said. Born and bred on Banku and bread. Take a leap of faith and watch my wings spread. Bachelor's pad, empty pizza boxes. Count my blessings, discount my losses. Monkey off my back, I hold my horses. My heart rate's higher than the rate of divorces. Nauseous by the parking meter. It's out of order. Fever my cortex. Day for Yankee like I be villager. Big man, them they treat me like teenager. The pressure, each chow pan, a day like police and thief, pam pam. Now I go host, I be just Johnny, just come for make dough before me and wifey drop down. But wifey no longer around, so I holler $4 and pounds, CDs and naira, francophone francs. If money talks, what does it cost to be frank? I the need speed meter. And they need vision, Mr. 2020, Charlie. Problems, chow chow, plenty. My mommy say, make I pray, just maybe. Now everybody one logo line. Papa Dogo eat the cocoa man of all kind. Chingalinga above 2 women with behind. Thank you. This is what we call a cheat code. Verse 3. So modern day popular music dominance. In the last few decades, there has been a proliferation of popular music in Ghana, and is arguably having its most dominant cultural moment in a century. Technology has become an equalizer and significantly lowered the barriers of entry for creators. With a laptop and an inexpensive microphone, in a tiny bedroom, a body of work can be created by any individual with internet data, a modicum of talents, and the patience for YouTube tutorials. Equally as important is technology's revolution in the dissemination and the consumption of popular music. Smartphones, the internet, social media, a plethora of free-to-air digital television and radio stations, have made consumption of music immediate, easier, and less costly than it was before. Vinyl records, cassette tapes, CDs, record stores are all redundant and relics of what seems like an ancient past. I'm sorry if I'm crushing your dreams if you own a lot of these. The change in the modes of dissemination from physical to digital have also given rise to the consumption and promotion of current popular music from Ghana and Africa by diaspora youth. By diaspora youth, i.e. immigrants living abroad, first generation Europeans and Americans who are of African descent. So now you have fancy things like Ghanaian Londoners, Ivorian Parisians, etc. Popular music is now used as a stimulant in consumer culture, politics, and religion, and therefore the remarkable power it wields is clear. Yes, it is true that historically our customs have had music as an intrinsic component. You have drummers at chieftaincy events and traditional festivals, funeral dirges to tell stories of the dearly departed, and songs for wartime. Today, however, in addition to all this, we now have an increased use of music for commerce, adverts, movies, TV shows, for politics, and for a competitive church industry. We all bear witness to the fact that in these times, not a single election nor product rollout occurs without an appropriation or tailor-made use of trending popular music. Correct or true or false? Viral cultural moments that dominate popular discourse, such as Kwa 2000, are amplified by popular music, while others, such as the infamous One Corner, are created by the music. It is apparent today that popular music is increasingly harnessed for fleeting cosmetic purposes, and rarely ever for top-tier transformation, such as an agenda of self-actualization. Musicians and composers in the popular music ecosystem, aka rappers, create not just out of a visceral need, but for the purposes of business and subsistence. This is just the reality. Creators mostly seek to pursue music and the cultural influence it wields to cash in. I believe the lack of infrastructure to fairly financially reward Ghanaian musicians for output, popularity, and cultural relevance has made the situation more acute. Systematically, music making is more of a financial grab than towards any kind of concerted societal transformation agenda. I think this is the fourth verse. Evolution of popular music resonance. It can be argued that from the late 1950s through the 1970s, some popular musicians from Ghana left musical footprints in the world that are still unrivaled by modern-day musicians of the hip life and Afrobeats epoch. Osibiza albums charted in many countries globally, while other acts like Ebo Taylor and Papa toured extensively in many more lands than younger acts. So to my younger comrades, when some of my peers come and boast and brag about how they've garnered to the world and all the things we've done, we have not actually scratched the surface. Much more has been done before us. They often benefited from the traditional structure of labels and distribution, and sometimes state support, as was the case during the Nkrumah years. However, the marked difference in resonance between now and then is due to the shift in context of information consumption and human interaction. This new era of 24-hour news cycles and social media has arguably increased the resonance of popular music in the everyday lived experience of young people in Ghana. There is currently little to no research supporting this except anecdotally. So maybe this is a challenge for the academics amongst us to indulge in such research, so that in my next one I can have a backing information, no anecdotes. Yeah. Today, express themselves online through hashtags and memes more than through ancient proverbs. Yeah, the truth is a punchline. True. Yeah. An illustration of this new shift is how the internet is rife with sloganeering culled from content from popular music. Check these ones out. Vibe song. Living my best life. Boys are bread. YOLO. You only live once. Forget you be a. Yint you be a. Chop my money, I don't care. Boys Casa. Forget you be a you play. Omada. In tandem to all this is the rise in celebrity culture and how the tales and relentless news stories about lives of popular musicians are consumed just as much as their music. A Shatawale Stonebwoy dispute on an award show will trample other issues of national importance and be front page of the Daily Graphic and many other serious news outlets. There are television stations solely dedicated to music videos and music news, as well as primetime shows on top radio stations that solely discuss popular music trends, artists, and industry events. This is all new territory to us. The new wave of Afrobeats, hip-hop, and dancehall commanding the popular music space exists in a culture of sorts. Artists have fierce followings and are able to influence throngs of youth with their life views and philosophies, their views on life and their philosophies. The era of the artist existing in an aura of mystique is gone. Every single day, artists interact with fans online, detailing their lives, giving opinions, and directly reaching a staggering number of people individually and collectively. The influence is significant even when it's cosmetic. For instance, one only has to attend the yearly La Même Gang concert in December to see over 1,000 teenagers not there in adulation, but with dyed hair and following the fashion of the group members. Sometimes the influence can also be culture shifting. Personally, I can share my own experience with the infamous God MC Kanta movement in 2016, which caused major disruption and sparked numerous conversations about content, substance, and why we had normalized Western fashion and inferiorized African fashion. I'm sure Dr. Amu would have been proud of that conversation, since he lost his job partly because of how he wanted to dress. Anecdotally, I have met many young people whose life views have been shaped or shaken by these popular music occurrences that have an impact on the culture they identify and live within. For instance, I once received a heartfelt letter from a young man. By heartfelt letter, I mean a message via Instagram DM. Since in this age we don't write letters the old way, unless of course for visa applications and for a job, in the letter, the young man thanked me for making music that helped him make it through secondary school bullying. I was floored by how my ability to make difference cool in a Ghanaian context was solace enough for the young man to make it through a trying time in secondary school years. But it was also quite instructive. We are now in a completely transformed era of consumer choice, and content is led and fed by the free market. An 18-year-old in Ghana can opt for entertainment channels for the entirety of their waking hours. Popular music and popular music culture is at the fore of most of this entertainment. So, the next verse, potential for self-actualization, the reimagining process. In order to self-actualize, one needs to be self-aware and have a sense of self-regard. Popular music has the ability to normalize, problematize, and/or amplify prevailing ideas about identity that are consequential to the aforementioned. An example of this: in a society burdened with the vestiges of colonial impositions on identity, you will notice that in Ghanaian popular music for many decades, we've normalized a colorism trope, mibroni, an affectionate term for my darling, that elevates a fairer or maybe a foreign skin color. Even the Bibini Brony iteration of the trope to address a dark-skinned lover contains the same loaded colorist insinuation that arguably contributes to the skin bleaching economy. If the music I love and sing along to tells me it's okay, why would I think any different? In the role of being able to problematize, the 2007 Hip Life example of Miss Bell's 16 Years song is a good case study. You know that song? Okay, wonderful. 16 Years explicitly rejects the prevalent occurrence of older men being sexually involved with underage girls, as well as giving linguistic urgency to young girls to rebuff and report the advances of such sexual predators. In a nation still plagued with, I think as high as over 20% of girls in child marriages, the importance of such pointed critiques and songs, which receive massive airplay, cannot be ignored. Interesting enough, it still remains Miss Bell's most popular song, right? So those who say substance doesn't sell, I mean, that's a lie in there. The progressive effects on self-regard of our popular music is not always as a result of content, but sometimes because of the form. By this I mean musical styles that center African music idioms in its creation have an undercurrent of validation for our style of expression. Pioneering hip-like figure, Reggie Rockstone, his name is coming up quite a bit today, told me a fascinating story about the creation and reception of arguably his biggest hits, featuring KK Fusu. Do you know that one? Reggie. Wow, okay. So he told me a fascinating story about the creation and reception of this, which now I'm not going to say arguably his biggest hit. His biggest hit, you've confirmed it. The story is instructive in regards to this assertion about the importance of form. So this is the story Reggie tells me. So Reggie's younger comrade, Mensa, a 19-year-old musical prodigy, created the beat for R, centered on the familiar high-life guitar melody and drum pattern. Reggie recalls being immediately disinterested in the composition. For him, it was just too slow and too much of a departure from the tree raps over hip-hop centered beats that rose him to prominence. Mensa, believing this was a game-changing move for Reggie in really reaching the masses in a more profound way, pleaded his case to no avail. He begged him, nothing. All bets were off. Reggie left the studio. He returned to hear a magical chorus with a vintage high-life swagger from a then unknown KK Fusu, who Reggie had paid absolutely no attention to in the studio before he left. A mundane story of infidelity and heartbreak was felt across the nation, even winning him a Continental Choral Award as well. It was the canvas and the form used that resonated. Reggie's has an interesting historical parallel with the impetus for some of Dr. Amu's earliest compositions, such as Onipa Daonso, Man, Be on Your Guard, or if it was today, it would be in Pidgin, Man, You For Day Guard. Dr. Amu once recounted to the BBC, quote, "As a preacher, whenever conducting services, I found that when the hymn was announced and we were singing, you could see that only the literate were singing. The illiterate were not singing, not because they hadn't heard any voice. They heard the voice, but the singing was strange to them. So I felt that they were being denied something. I felt that our hymns should be written in our way of singing. I felt that our hymns should be written in our ways of singing." So I think we should hear how he put that into application. Dr. Amu reimagined singing in church, using an African idiom in a European institution. Similarly, the new wave of Afrobeats, hip-hop, and dancehall commanding the popular music space is in constant flux of reimagining. The music by itself wields enormous influence, but this influence in itself is not complete nor fully effective without ties to socio-economic and cultural movements at the grassroots. I'll give the example of the 60s and 70s civil rights and Black consciousness movements in America, which were complemented by seminal songs by the likes of Nina Simone, Young, Gifted, and Black, James Brown, Say It Loud. You see now, we're in your time. I saw Auntie Amate say it before everybody else. Curtis Mayfield, We the People Who Are Darker Than Blue, etc. So, on to shifting the gaze of aspiration. In the 60s, during the wave of African independence, the African identity was linked to political ideology. And today we are seeing a more fluid and multi-dimensional framing of what it means to be from and of the African continent. Popular music is at the center of this discourse. At least that's what I'm claiming. Popular music is also shaping the relationship between Africans at home and in the diaspora. In the last decade alone, we've seen the emergence of homegrown popular music forms having a wider reaching impact in Western countries with a sizable African diaspora population. Through this wave, currently culminating in the Afrobeat movement, there has been a shift in how diaspora Africans self-identify. A cursory look at some of the UK's biggest music stars reveals a burgeoning citizenry that is unafraid to speak of themselves as British and African. Jahaz, Gambian British; Skepta, Nigerian British; Stormzy, Ghanaian British; Tiny Temper, Nigerian British, to name a few examples of this. In case the significance of this is lost to some of us, I remember even as recent as when I was a teenager, when I would go to London and would be around first generation British of African descent. Most of them were trying to self-identify as Jamaicans. It was not cool to be African, but the music, alas, is changing this. The next frontier of this discourse is how to use popular music in an intentional way for the self-actualization agenda. To find our social bearing, we need a cultural compass. In an increasingly globalized world, heavily influenced by technology, culture continues to be dynamic and complex. Cultures and subcultures wielding influence on millennials are rapidly evolving and are not just worthy of study, but necessary in understanding how we can reimagine ourselves for the purposes of development. Uncovering the role of popular music on Dr. Amu almost a century ago opened a window for me in thinking through how the power of the music can be harnessed beyond entertainment. How do we harness this power without rigorous and extensive study of it? Again, I ask, how do we harness this power without rigorous and extensive study of it? When I was invited by Professor Akusi Adakwa, I believe she's here, in 2014 to speak with her sociology class at the University of Ghana, the impetus for her was to make the idea of globalization more immediate and relevant to her students. She wanted to engage her students on their interests. That interest was popular music. It taught me something. I think there's that saying about everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life believing it's stupid, right? So I think it really did teach me about the importance of going to where you can reach people or connect to people the most. I'll conclude with a lesson learned from delving into the life and work of Dr. Ephraim Amu. Dr. Amu was a great teacher, and in researching his life's work, the thought hit me: every great teacher is a committed student. He was not dismissive of popular music, but rather studied it and applied lessons from it to his compositions that have for so long impacted many of us in subtle ways. It is time for us to commit to a serious study of popular music. Reducing it to a passing fad for the youth is risking losing it as a tool to shape behavior in an intentional way. A cultural revolution in how we see ourselves is possible, and popular music is a major key. Thank you for your indulgence. I know I said I was done, but it would be quite unfortunate if the young people didn't have the last word. So I think I'm going to improvise something. Can I do that? Yes. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Outcasts and misfits, underdogs throwing fits. What you could do when it hits? Let me switch gears for the stick shift. Outcasts and waitress, work more, they pay less. Kayo with the head low, she demanded the speed of techno. Trotra mates counts with him, she could have been a mathematician. And in addition, he knows for social division. We all to eat fish, care less who's doing the fishing. At the chop bar, that's the sheriff febbing. Invisible man with visible fears at airports is when I appear. Bell buckles and shoes off, small underwear I won't see. Faceless with a face mask in the train holding my day pass. It's the day pass and the handtake on the big band. I'm a hostage. Keep playing the same thing. Continue. I'm going to crave your indulgence because I think he wants a drama. So would you help me by, can I do a clapping pattern that we all join in? Okay, we're good? So it'll be ka 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 ka. I was out one night for relaxation. Young lady flagging me down, hesitation. In East Legon, you know where they sell medication. Same place, Charlie, where they sell. I'm not judging, just something to touch on. You know how the economy day, boys pay to get a hat on. Girls dressed for the night work and fellatio, that's light work, get a mini skirt and it might work. Now back to the young lady, couldn't be more than 17. Maybe in the daytime she's a DJ, wearing a hijab, transform in the nighttime, wearing secular gaps. Nobody seeing pain, she's just out for grabs. Me too, I'm minding my business, I hit the gas and pass. Can I be a member? I do surrender. I have no agenda. Just see me. Thank you for being an amazing band.
What an impeccable speech. M.Anifest showed up and dropped so many pearls of wisdom. A captivating speech from start to finish. This keynote speech was a delight and truly refreshing. M.Anifest undoubtedly is one of the finest authentic artists from the African continent, and it gives me great joy to hear what he has to say on a platform of such magnitude. Echoing the voices of young people, I couldn't have thought of a better Ghanaian artist to do this. This was right up his alley. One of the things that stood out for me was how an artist of M.Anifest's caliber mentioned those who came before him, the likes of Reggie Rockstone, Obrafo, or Komfo Kwadi. Such a heartwarming moment. A perfect example of giving people their flowers while they can still smell them, because real recognize real. An important lesson on acknowledging those we revere when they're still alive. We should actually normalize giving people their flowers while they can still smell them. So shout out to M. The other thing that stood out for me was how he touched on colorism, the ever so persistent elephant in the room like colorism, addressed by a hip-hop artist, was a truly refreshing moment. But then again, M.Anifest is not your regular hip-hop artist. I mean, we all know that he's got a great head on his shoulders. So it was really refreshing to hear. And I truly hope he's having these conversations with his peers in the industry, because addressing such pertinent issues like colorism should not be only ceremonial, but rather a way of life. So, M.Anifest, I hope you're having these conversations with your peers and, addressing any tendencies they may have on colorism or whatever pertinent social issues, social, political, economic issues. I know you know better, right? So that said, we need more artists like M.Anifest who are both self-aware and also aware of social issues, because their art does not operate in a vacuum. And that's it for this edition. Thank you for your time. Keep well.